Stuart Hopkins sat on the floor of his den one rainy afternoon after he had gotten home from school, his chin resting on his knees. A jolly hot fire was blazing in the fireplace before him. "Golly, wonder what I can do until dinner time," he yawned. "Just sitting here in front of the fire makes me sleepy." He thought hard for a minute, and then he said, "I know, I'll play with my trains." He jumped up and went over to a large box that stood next to his father's bookcase, and he dragged it over to the front of the fire. As he started emptying the box, he muttered to himself, "Well, here are my tracks and crossing signals, but where are all my other things?" He dug down a little deeper and found them. Tracks, tiny trains, signals, railroad stations, and tunnels. Then he set the tracks together, connected the trains, and turned on the switch. Around and around they went, switching and turning. Stuart played for about a half an hour until he became a little bored. A sudden idea made him cry out, "Why didn't I think of that before? Why, I can build a whole village right here on the floor." Then he called out to his mother, "Mother, do we have any old magazines you don't want?" "On the bottom shelf of Daddy's bookcase, Stuart," answered his mother from the living room. "You'll find quite a stack of them there." With all of his sleepiness gone, Stuart busily set to work on his village. First, he cut out all the tall green trees, pasted them on cardboard to make them stand by themselves, then placed them along the tracks and in the center of the circle of the railroad tracks. Then came the houses with automobiles parked in the driveways. "All I need now are a few people," said Stuart, cutting more pictures out of the magazine. "Maybe I'll put some dogs and cats in the village, too." In a 1, 2, 3, the city was all finished, and how pretty it looked, too. Stuart put some people in the tiny waiting rooms at the railroad stations, and conductors along with the engineers in the trains. He was just about to turn on the train switch again when he heard a voice say, "All aboard!" Stuart laughed at himself. "I just guess I thought I heard someone say something to me," said Stuart to himself. Then he heard the voice again. He couldn't be mistaken. "All aboard for Happy Village! Train's leaving 2 minutes, 5.5 seconds. Board!" Stuart's eyes opened wide and his jaw dropped. "Why, I can't believe it," he muttered. "That's coming from my little conductors. My paper people are talking." All at once there was a noisy buzz from the waiting room where the people were buying their tickets. It seemed that all those leaving on the trains were carrying lunch baskets. "Looks as though they were going on a picnic," cried Stuart. "But I didn't build any picnic grounds." As Stuart looked more closely at his little village, he happened to put his foot across the train tracks just in front of the engine. The sound of a loud whistle cracked the air, and the train started to puff. Smoke curled up out of the top, and it chugged a few inches and stopped. Stuart's ears hurt as the noise of the shouting grew louder and louder. "Goodness, what are they shouting for?" cried Stuart. "Why don't they just go on their picnic the way they're supposed to?" Almost as soon as he had asked, Stuart learned the reason why. All the engineers and the conductor had run out of the trains and gathered on the tracks, a few inches from where Stuart's foot rested. "What's the matter?" shouted a passenger. "Why don't we go?" "We can't move ahead," shouted back the conductor. "There's something on the tracks in front of the engine." That was all the passengers needed to hear, and they poured out of the trains in streams. In a few minutes, the whole village knew about the thing on the railroad tracks. No one would go near it, and they stood about in little groups, huddled together and whispering. Then Stuart threw back his head and laughed. "Why, it's my foot they're afraid of," he said. "They don't know what it is. Well, I think I'll just keep it there for another few minutes and see what they do." "We want to go on our picnic," complained one of the passengers. "Why don't you stop the train and run right over the thing?" "Oh, no," said the conductor, shaking his head wisely. "It might be alive. Then it could knock us off the tracks and we'd all be hurt. Oh, it's bigger than the train. Then what chance would we have?"
"Well, I suppose you're right," agreed the passenger. "The thing for us to do is to try to push the thing off. If you're all afraid, and I think you are, I'll go all by myself. We can't stay here all day."
The conductor and the engineers shifted from one foot to another, trying to look brave. "All right," they said. "We'll go with you. Come on, everybody. Let's rush it and surprise it before it knows what's happening." Stuart, watching from above, smiled, and he braced his foot more firmly on the tracks. The people ran up to it and pushed, but it didn't move. "Say, now that I've gotten a little closer to it and touched it," cried the conductor, wiping his forehead, "it seems to me that it's a great big shoe." The passengers couldn't believe that.
"Oh, don't be silly. How could it be a shoe?" snapped the passenger. "Wait a minute, though."
On a closer look, the passenger shook her head.
"Why, yes, sir, it does look like a shoe," she agreed. "But how could an old shoe get thrown out on our tracks? It must belong to one of those things called human beings."
"But he didn't throw it," cried the conductor in terror. "The shoe is still on him. That's his foot." The passengers looked blank. "Well, what are we to do?" they asked. "He's dangerous. He could lift our whole city with one hand, and that would be the end of us." Surely, here was a huge problem for the little people. What to do? We could get a crane and try to lift it away," suggested a passenger, trying to be helpful. "Oh, no, that's no good," replied the conductor. "Our crane isn't strong enough. We've got to do something to make him take it away himself." His eyes traveled from Stuart's shoe up until they came to his head. "Why, he's miles and miles up in the air!" he exclaimed. "Men, I've got it!" cried the engineer. "We can stand on each other's shoulders until we reach his ears, and then we could ask him, ever so politely and kindly, to take it away." All the villagers looked at each other.
"Well," said one passenger, it's a little risky, but I'm willing."
"Are all of you with me?" asked the engineer. Everyone shouted together, "Yes, right you are." "Well, here we go," hollered the engineer. "I'll be the last one on the ladder so that I can talk to this human being." One by one, the conductor, the engineers, and passengers stood on one another's shoulders, and the ladder of the little people got higher and higher and shakier and shakier. "Hey, this is fun!" laughed Stuart as he watched the little paper people panting and working. "Say, do you think you'll ever make it?" He shouted as loud as he could so that the people down at the bottom of the ladder could hear. The noise was so loud in the ears of the little paper people that they lost their balance and fell in a heap right on the boy's lap. And what a confusion there was! "Stuart, come in for dinner!" Stuart could hardly believe his ears. Were the little paper people asking him to come for dinner after all he had done to them? "Did you hear me, Stuart? I said that it was dinner time." At this point, Stuart finally knew who was asking him to come to dinner. It was his mother. "Yes, Mother," he called back, "as soon as these people stop their screaming and pinching and—" "What? Say, that's funny." Stuart rubbed his eyes and looked down at the train set and paper village. Everything and everyone was in the proper place, just as before. Very, very slowly, the little boy disconnected the tracks and the signals and put them back in the storage box where they belonged. And last of all, the paper people of the paper village fell asleep, just as Stuart had done.